So I'm back, and you got to see an actual video of me in the last one. My apologies for that, for having you suffer through that. But at any rate, one thing I noticed was in the last video, I forgot to give a keyword. So let me go ahead and give a keyword that you can write down for the first part of the admissions procedure. So admission procedures part 1. Let's use the keyword waiver. W-A-I-V-E-R. All right, so a couple of things I want to amend from the last video that you watched is that with respect to the hepatitis B, now all of the hepatitis B, there's usually 3 injections for that. All of those are now required to be completed by the time you would enter into the program, which is in late August. So you have to have to be on schedule and have to demonstrate that you're on schedule to have the hepatitis B completed by the time the school starts in late August. Also, something else worth noting is the word titers. I spelled it with a T-I-D-E-R-S, and actually I looked up, and you can spell it that way, but a lot more common spelling is T-I-T-E-R-S, so there's that. It's also worth noting that you're actually making really what amounts to 2 applications, one to the college and one to the radiation therapy program, separately from the college, really, or they can sometimes have some linked similarities, but basically you have to kind of approach it like you're making 2 applications, one to the college and one to the program. Now, I personally don't require you to apply to the college as you're applying for the program, but as you go through various application processes, it may kind of take you through those steps. So if it takes you through those steps, then just follow through with those steps. But if it doesn't take you through the steps of applying for the college, don't worry about it. I'm only really terribly concerned about you applying for the college, especially once you know if you're accepted into the program or not. But one thing that's worth mentioning is that I just really want you to realize that you do have to make those 2 separate applications. I remember there was a case many, many years ago where a woman applied to Amarillo College and she was accepted into Amarillo College. And she thought that that meant that she was also accepted into the radiation therapy program. She had never contacted me. I'd never heard from her or anything. And come the first day of classes, she had moved here from like far away. And I had to break her heart and tell her that she'd never applied for the radiation therapy program. It was terrible. But I do just want to emphasize that so that you know that you're applying, really making 2 applications, one for the college and one for the radiation therapy program. Also worth noting is that you may see, I'm showing you some of these documents, but the documents may change and evolve over time, so don't worry if they don't look exactly the way that they look on here. Also, the way that we submit applications may change over time too. At the time that I'm making this recording, we're doing everything still by paper, but we're transitioning into a way to be able to submit application materials, or at least many of them, electronically. The whole Allied Health Division is doing that. So what I describe here may evolve or change over time as well, and there'll be processes that will become more and more transparent and more clear as you go through those processes. But at least for this moment, everything is still paper. Okay, tell you what, let me go ahead and give you the first keyword for this admission procedures part 2. That first keyword is the word acorn. Acorn, A-C-O-R-N. So you've already listened to a lot of the materials that start off talking about the application procedures, but I do want to just kind of emphasize a couple of things. Do not mail the entire application packet if we're doing these mail submissions. Just the required documents described in this section. So don't send all of these dozens and dozens of pages in, just the documents themselves. And this gives some important information here as far as submission through snail mail. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to where we kind of left off with the last one. Of course, our immunization stuff looks a little bit different, as we mentioned earlier. So be sure and check out all the immunization requirements and get those submitted properly. Okay, so I think we left off with information acknowledgement form. That's just another form found a little bit later on in the packet website. And that form basically says that you've received information about the radiation therapy program and the application processes, which is, kind of repetitive if you think about it. I mean, if you were filling out the other forms, then shouldn't it be kind of clear that you received information? Hey, I don't make the rules, I just kind of follow the rules. So there we go, information acknowledgement form. The next is the keyword stuff. We've already kind of talked about that. You've been completing that as well. Next is general health, and we've got some forms later on that describe in pretty good detail the health requirements of the program. It's really not a terribly physically demanding job. One of the harder things is really just standing up on your feet all day if you're not used to that. I worked my way through radiation therapy school at McDonald's in part, and I gotta tell you, McDonald's was a much more physically demanding job than I think radiation therapy was, but the requirements that we have are very important. Things like, being able to lift a certain amount of weight so you can be able to help lift patients up and down out of wheelchairs and stuff. You don't do it by yourself, but you help. Also being able to see and have good vision in low light and be able to read information. So really just kind of check out that form that's a little bit later on and make sure that you can satisfy those requirements. If you have anything that you're concerned about, any physical condition or illness or anything that is not specified in the documentation but you feel is something worth bringing up as a possible impediment to being able to fulfill the physical requirements of being a radiation therapist, please bring that to my attention, because we want to make sure and get you all cleared for those kinds of things before you would be accepted into the program. Next, we have the computer requirements, and I've already kind of talked a little bit about the hardware and software requirements, but here we get into much more detail about your abilities to work with computers and your background in working with computers. This is an online program, and you need to have pretty decent online skills, pretty decent computer skills. And one way to find out whether or not you're ready for online programming is using this Smart Measure Distance Education Readiness module. So you'll be it describes here how you go through the module and report those findings to me, basically, and we'll discuss those findings at your required follow-up visit, which is also, again, talked about a little bit later on in this packet. So we want to make sure that you're up to speed, so to speak, with your computer skills, because it's pretty important. If you're not really able to figure out how to work email and basic word processing and stuff like that, you might have some real difficulties in working in our online program. This is a computer-specific program curriculum, so yeah, we kind of need that to be ready and doing well. And here's your next keyword. The second keyword for this section is the word tree, T-R-E-E. And scrolling on past the Smart Measure stuff, there's some empty pages there. All right, so the next thing we see is other required portfolio procedures. These are other things to be mindful of. There's a civil rights requirement that's described here. Basically, if you've ever been convicted of anything more serious than a minor traffic violation, like speeding ticket, running a stop sign, stuff like that, then you have to make sure you will be eligible to get a license to practice radiation therapy once you graduate. So there's information here about how to contact the licensing or certification agency if you have any questions or anything like that. Be sure and contact them. There's a procedure that you can go through that they will have you probably go through to make sure that you're all cleared and stuff like that. So for our purposes, though, we do have a criminal background check, but I don't require you to go through that criminal background check until you know that you've been accepted in the program, because it's kind of program specific to us at any rate, and it also saves you the cost. That way you don't have to do that up front. You only have to do that criminal background check once you know that you're accepted into the program. So there's some information about that as well. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times a follow-up visit. After you submit your application portfolio, and the portfolio, I really, really need all of the portfolio to be sent at one time, not little bits here, not little bits there. Send everything at one time, or wait to get all your stuff put together to be able to send any snail mail materials. There may be, again, times where some stuff is going to be submitted electronically. That's okay. But anything that's going to be mailed to me, mail it all at one time. Then once you send any materials to me, once your application portfolio is complete, give it a few days to get to me, maybe 3 or 4 business days, and then send me an email. Send me an email. And my email is scattered all throughout this document, except for, of course, right here. But at any rate, send me an email requesting the follow-up visit. The follow-up visit is where we just basically kind of go over your application and make sure it's complete, talk more about the program, I give you some more information, and we just kind of set up things like your clinical site visit and get all the T's crossed and I's dotted, make sure all your ducks in a row, so to speak, with your application. Now, if you live outside the 806 area code, then the follow-up visit is done by phone, and that's perfectly fine. So that would be typically the case for the distance education applicants. But if you live within the 806 area code, then you're going to come here and visit with me personally. There's also a clinical site visit requirement, a job shadow requirement, and that if you're living in the Amarillo area and applying for the Amarillo area, it's 4 clock hours of visitation at a local hospital watching what we do. And if you're a distance application, it's 16 hours for distance applications. So there's also some forms on down the line that are required for the clinical site visit. And the clinical site visit, as you'll see, actually counts as points towards acceptance. And there's a form that you fill out that you give to me, and then a second form that you take that you give to the clinical site, and they'll fill that out and then deliver that to me. And that's where the points come from. So moving along. The next keyword, by the way, is the word sports. Plural, sports, S-P-O-R-T-S. It also does state for distance applicants that the required clinical site visit must take place basically at the clinic where you intend to do your clinical training. So all the clinical formalities, getting all that paperwork done to approve a new clinic, if it is a new clinic, all that has to be taken care of before you do your clinical site visit. So distance applications, the sooner you get those started, probably the better off you'll be. Certainly you want to get those started no later than before it turns springtime, basically, officially. And earlier is better. Then we scroll on down to application deadlines. Application deadlines, these are all the deadlines. These may change as some of our requirements and rules from the Division of Allied Health or Health Sciences requires us to change. But nonetheless, there's different deadlines if you're a local area student versus a distance student, so pay attention to all those. And that wraps up this section.